Good morning, my friends. We're continuing with our roadmap for right living based on the 52 qualities Swami describes in this wonderful little book, Affirmations for Self-Healing. So let us begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, dear friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Open our hearts with your grace, calm our minds, make us receptive to your guiding presence. Help us to feel the wisdom and the joy of the spiritual path, that we may walk with courage and determination and enthusiasm, following the footsteps you have laid before us that lead to our divine home in thee. Om. Peace. Amen. For those who watch real time, which I know is many fewer than watch later, I will not be broadcasting next Monday. I'm taking a short trip to see some friends from Europe who are visiting America. And so that I won't be here on Monday, and actually won't be here on Thursday of next week, so there'll only be 2 broadcasts. Things are getting a little chunky for the next few weeks, and will become increasingly chunky as the months go by, but mostly I'll be broadcasting. You can go to my website, Asha Joy, and you'll see what is and what isn't happening. So, we are on quality number 5, the quality of sharing. I thought it was interesting that he put this. We've had success, love, energy. What was the 4th one? Happiness. Success, love, happiness, energy. And now we come to sharing. And I know for a fact that Swami put these in an order that he thought was beneficial. I can't really say that he put them in descending order of priority, but I'm very happy that sharing is right here. I found in my own life the generosity of heart, which is another way of saying the same thing, is one of the most wonderful spiritual practices, and so one of the most important qualities for right living, which is what we're talking about. And I know that generosity is also one of the qualities that will come later in this book. So now he calls it sharing. And I'll read the 3 short paragraphs he has, and then we'll talk about them in detail. True happiness is found not in possessions, but in sharing what one has with others. Thus is one's self-identity expanded as he learns to live in and enjoy a greater reality. Live in and enjoy a greater reality. People who gladly share with others feel themselves bathed by a constant inner stream of happiness. It's a very strong statement. We'll have to explore that. People who gladly share find themselves inwardly bathed with happiness. Everybody wants that happiness. Swami's just directly saying those who share have it. Sharing is the doorway through which the soul escapes the prison of self-preoccupation. It is one of the clearest paths to God. Well, he's putting a lot on this quality, so we're going to have fun talking about it. So he starts with the material plane. True happiness is found not in possessions, but in sharing what one has with others. I was thinking recently, as I often do, about the state of the world right now and the predictions that Master has made about things getting worse before they get better, and also an analysis of a modern society that Swami made, where he talked about there being 4 basic karmic groups that are occupying planet Earth right now, and have different roles, and I've talked about it at different times, but it's relevant here. He talked about Atlanteans, meaning people who were prominent in Atlantis, and he said that the techno scientists who took Atlantis, affirming that this is not a myth, but this is a fact, who took Atlantis farther and farther away from attunement with the natural world, more and more into a technology-based society, until the dissonance between the vibrations of the society and the natural energy of Mother Earth caused cataclysmic events, which caused the whole continent of Atlantis to sink and the whole civilization to be destroyed. So a lot of those Atlanteans are back, and they're leading the technological revolutions that are happening now. I want to put a caveat in that. Not everything technological is wrong by any means. Technology liberates us from many of the compelling, limiting aspects of the material world. Just being able to write a book, for example, with a computer instead of with a pencil completely changes what you can say and how quickly you can write, how clearly you can write. When Swami Kriyananda got a computer program that allowed him to play notes, melodies on the piano, and the computer translated it into written music, it just completely liberated him to write music, because he received the melodies so quickly, but by that point he was even having trouble with his hand. It had a tremor. But to write the notes just took forever. To get the melodies took no time at all, but to write it down took tremendous effort. So when he could just play it, because the tremor didn't affect his piano playing, then all of a sudden all this music could pour out of him. So much technology facilitates refined humanity. However, there can also be this obsessive interest in technological advancement that gradually begins to try to conquer rather than cooperate with Mother Nature. And as Swami says, Mother Nature will take it for a long time, but when she decides to strike back, there's no stopping her. So that distorted passion for technology put the whole society of Atlantis so out of tune with the natural world that Mother Earth struck back, and the whole continent went under. The others are those who were living in the fall of Rome, when sensuality and moral depravity and self-indulgence and excessive materialism just took over and completely brought that civilization to the ground. Then comes what Swami says are two kinds of Indians, and Swami's talking about America primarily right now, the USA primarily, although you see the seeds of it elsewhere, but America is what he's talking about. Those of us who have had many lifetimes in India, and therefore are very in tune with Vedanta, with the worldview, with yoga, with reincarnation, with karma, all of these wonderful ideas of self-realization. We're living in the West, we're living Western lives, but our understanding of the world is very Eastern. And then there are Indians who are the Native Americans from this soil, from the first inhabitants whose civilization was already on the decline, but was completely obliterated by the coming of the European settlers primarily. So two kinds of Indians, Atlanteans and Romans. Swami said that the Atlanteans are doing the science and all of technology. The Romans are doing politics and entertainment. And so the politicians are self-serving for the most part, self-indulgent, without a moral compass except self-interest. And the entertainment business is just fostering moral depravity to the point where we don't even know it's depraved. Just taking down all walls, all boundaries, whatever pleasure I can find, whatever stimulation I can find. If I want violence, we'll give you violence. If I want sexuality, we'll give you sexuality. So that people's minds are just being spun by the gratification of any impulse that comes through them begins to present itself as, quote, entertainment, like this. Now, the Atlanteans and the Romans both brought their civilizations down by their misunderstandings. And Swami said the Atlanteans and the Romans are going to bring the USA down again. And they're very busy doing it by just, by doing the same thing, out of attunement with the natural world and self-indulgence to the point where there'll be no moral structure to sustain. So it will all come down. This is what Master promised. And there will be violent disruptions on the whole globe, because even without these exact groups, the whole world is following the same pattern. And when they have finished their destruction, then the two kinds of Indians will just pick up what's left and start creating a new society. And the interesting part, Swami says, is that the two kinds of Indians know that the Atlanteans and the Romans are here. Their power is self-evident. But the Atlanteans and the Romans don't really know that we, the Indians, are here. And so those of them that are left will be quite surprised at how cohesive a society we create. And, you know, the American Indians are involved in all the ecology and harmony with nature, and the East Indians are involved with the new kind of spirituality based on actual experience and not on dogma. And we, of course, are very intertwined with each other and overlap. You know, those of us who have been Indian of either kind have often been both kinds and feel a deep attunement with both of them. I remember a period of time when I just read very deeply all about the Indian societies, and I felt Swami even gave me a book on the subject as a birthday present, so it was an affirmation of my interest. But what I realized, and this was a very, very deeply comforting idea for me, is that we Indians of all kinds, and not only do we have a cohesive understanding, but we have a very simple shared perception of reality. And I say we, I mean all over the world, the people who are advocating these ways of living in harmony with nature and as part of a greater reality and inner experience. We know how to live. We already know how to do it. It's just simple and self-evident. And so our turn, when it comes, there won't be a long startup period. And it comes to me because I thought of it specifically in terms of sharing. Because what's going on now in the world is that enormous, wildly exaggerated accumulation and indulgence is happening on one side, and just a level of simplicity. I remember a friend of mine who retired from his tech job just before the age of 30 described himself as an Enoughinaire. He said he didn't need to be a millionaire or a billionaire. He was an Enoughinaire. He had what he needed. He had what he needed to live well. In fact, after about a decade, he realized that he enjoyed the work he'd been doing. And he just went back to work, not because he needed the money, but because he enjoyed it. And that was a whole different way to do it. But there is just this insane accumulation. And again, this is all like fostered by the Romans also, that you have to have so many things, and the things that you have to have are so expensive, just so expensive. Swami's family was very refined. His mother was a very refined person and a very spiritual person, but still she was caught in the values of her society. And Swamiji at the dinner table once, this was when he was a grown man and was founding Ananda, and his family was reasonably well off, and they lived in the higher tier of society, socially and economically. And Swami made the comment at the dinner table, imagine, he said, earning all that money and then just spending it on yourself. And his mother said, well, that's a novel perspective. And Swami said he thought to himself, what other perspective is there? You know, to accumulate all that money and then spend it on yourself? Swami, in the course of his lifetime, literally, personally, earned millions of dollars teaching and gathering and fundraising and doing projects and winning awards, just millions of dollars. At the end of his life, he had nothing because he gave it all to what he believed in. He spent it all for the building of Ananda, which was not in any way a personal profit for him, in spreading his master's teachings. Whenever money would accumulate, he would find some creative way to do something with it, to print books, to make recordings, to get needed equipment so that he could write or he could travel or whatever it might be. It just went in and it went out. And when I was thinking about us Indians and how we would just make a new society, let's say society has been devastated by war and there's a scarcity of resources, but it's fundamental. We are a part of all that is. You know, the entire American Indian culture was based on the tribe as a unit that takes care of itself. And people did not. In fact, even now, in certain of the Indian cultures, it's not, you're not considered to be successful for what you accumulate. When in many of these tribes, if they see you accumulating, they immediately think, what's wrong with you? You're considered to be a noble and a successful person for what you can give away, for what of your abundance you just are able to share with everyone and make sure everyone in the community is well taken care of. And so I was thinking, you know, if in that side of society, if I have 5 and you have none, then I take what I have and I give you as much of it as I can give you, as much as you need, as much as I'm able to share. Every time I get something that is like for hard times, I always have to buy 2 or if possible 3, because I know myself. If I hope to have even 1 at the end, I need to have a spare or 2, because we are all part of a greater reality. How could I just take it for myself knowing that someone right on the other side of the door was deprived? And so that kind of sharing, that's why Swami said true happiness is found not in possessions, but in sharing what one has with others. It's a platitude, and it's a platitude because it's true, but it's no longer a platitude when it just becomes part of the way you live. Oh, you like this? Let me give it to you. Just, oh, this would be helpful too. Oh, you're missing? You don't have a good coat? You're missing a pair of socks? You need another sweater? Here, I have too many. And how many is too many? There was a very well-known, very wealthy man who lived so simply. He had 1 pair of shoes. He pointed out because he only had 1 pair of feet. It was just like, how simple can you be? I have 2 feet and I have 2 shoes. Like, what would I do with more shoes? I'm not a millipede who needs all those shoes. Now, Master himself said that, you know, in the past, the definition of spirituality was poverty. And he pointed out the degree of impoverishment that St. Francis lived with. And Master said, even though St. Francis was what he called his patron saint, he said, we differ in that St. Francis worshipped Lady Poverty and is devoted to Lady Poverty. Worship is the wrong word. And Master said that he was devoted to Lady Simplicity. And simplicity is a marvelous word in this context, because when I was growing up spiritually with Swamiji, he always had more than I had. His house was bigger. He had more things in his house. But as I began to watch, it was because his life was bigger than mine. His involvement with other people was much bigger than mine. His projects and the necessity to carry out those projects was much bigger and much more complicated. So when Swami built a recording studio as part of the Crystal Hermitage complex where he was living, and he put state-of-the-art equipment in that, for state-of-the-art for what he needed, it wasn't extravagance. It was simple living, because once he had his own recording studio and could record, without having to drive 4 hours to another city and then rent at great cost for just a few hours a recording studio, he could record any time of the day or night, as often as he wanted, as effortlessly as possible. And then he began to put out music and speaking radio programs and television programs, and as time passed, internet programs. And it was just simply, he had what he needed to do what he came to do. And it was very interesting because he spent a long time developing Crystal Hermitage, which was, it started out just as this dome, which was his entire living space. Eventually that dome became a community center, and a dining room and a kitchen were added, and then he had a small apartment downstairs. His private quarters was in a separate area, but part of the same complex. And as he was building that up, he'd had this idea for a long time that he thought that you could decorate in such a way as to emphasize the unity of all nations, world brotherhood, as Master had called it in his time. Swami had wanted us to build a guest facility in which each guest room would be dedicated to a particular country, and he even sort of thought what those countries would be. And he started accumulating things so that you could put carved furniture, or the bedstead, or art on the wall that would make you feel you were in Bali, or you were in China, or you were in India, or in Mexico, or in New England, in the United States. And so he started accumulating these things. The guest programs were never able quite to manifest the idea that he had, but as he began to develop Crystal Hermitage, he began to use all of these internationally acquired things in the house. So if you get a tour of Crystal Hermitage, this mirror is from Israel, this carved piece is from Bali, these chandeliers are from Czechoslovakia, and this furniture is from Kashmir. And so it's really fun. You sort of see a lot of the art on the wall was done by an Italian painter. You see all these different countries' aesthetic very harmoniously combined, and it gives you an appreciation, which is what Swami's intention was, of what that's about. So he developed the house over a few years, acquiring things when he traveled and designing certain areas and so on. And then he reached a point where it was done. And then later, I remember I was out traveling with him somewhere in the world, and someone said, "Oh, that's such a pretty lampshade or a pretty painting, whatever it was. That would look so nice in Crystal Hermitage." And Swami's answer was perfect. He said, "Crystal Hermitage is done. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life acquiring more and more for it." Because it was simple living that he was looking for. And the simplicity of it was that I bring it to the point where I'm satisfied with it, and that's enough. It's not the doing of it. I'm not dependent on buying all these things to be happy. I'm not trying to have more and more possessions. I wanted to have possessions to bring it to the point. So simplicity is to have what you need. And if you have a position in life in which you need to look a certain way, you need a certain kind of wardrobe, well, you have to have it. It's not necessarily even appropriate to shirk your responsibilities. I remember Swamiji constantly being on me to dress nicer. As he put it, he said, "It's other people who have to look at you." He said, and as out of respect for them, you should dress in a refined way, because then your influence will be uplifting. And it took me a long time to understand that, but when I began to understand what he wanted, and I began to have a role in front of people when I started traveling in the early 80s and eventually settled in this community, people had to look at me. I had to stand in front of people for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and they generally looked at me while I was talking, and I realized I needed to present myself in a pleasing manner. So I had to go and consult with people who could help me learn how to do that, because I had no natural talent for it, or let me say my natural understanding of it was dormant. I gradually learned, and then I had to spend money to do it. But it was also in a very interesting way. It wasn't sharing possessions, but it was sharing the right vibration, and it was being willing to invest the limited income I had and the limited time and energy I had, because I wanted to share Master's teachings. And in order to share Master's teachings, I needed to be conscious of the whole effect of what I was doing. At a certain point, Swami bought a better car than the car he had been driving, Not because the car he was driving was inadequate for the purpose. It was perfectly fine. But Swami was a representative of Master's teachings in this world. And his life was dedicated to sharing those teachings. He wasn't there living just for himself. He was there to represent his Master's teachings. And in the United States, he said, where money is not that hard to come by compared to really impoverished nations, he said, if I drive a car that is as cheap and broken down, as cheap and old and as unattractive as the one he was driving, people will think, why can't he drive a better car? There must be something wrong with what he's doing that he can't afford even a better car than that. He didn't have to have a Rolls Royce, and he bought just a mid-level American car. But he had to have something that showed that he understood, that he was refined, that he was competent, that he was able to do it. And his interest was in sharing. So Swami, you know, cars cost thousands of dollars. Swami took on the responsibility of earning those thousands of dollars because he wanted to share. He wanted to share the teachings in this case. And he was a constant example of sharing possessions just effortlessly. I remember when he was always very interested in getting the most effective computer systems as computer systems developed. He was one of the first to really get it because of writing books. He saw immediately that the application for writing books that the computer provided was going to enable him to do much more. And as things developed, and so he ended up with a printer that was just one step back from the better one that he had. And it was available, and someone heard that it was available, and this man came, and he wanted to buy it for his mother. And it was, I don't know, something on the order of like $1,200 or something like that, or $700. It was a significant sum of money, especially at that time. And he wanted to buy it. And Swami knew that the man didn't have that much money, and he was getting it as a gift for his mother. And Swami said, no, I'm not going to sell it to you. I'm going to give it to you. And he protested. He said, well, you know, you don't have to give it to me. I'll buy it for my mother. And Swami said, and it was so sweetly, she's my mother too. Just like that. And she was a friend, but not even that close a friend. But it's like, if your mother needs it, then my mother needs it. And the money that he would get from it just didn't mean anything compared to supporting his mother. His mother was his mother. But it just always, it was so sweet to me, just the way Swami saw it. Oh, it's needed by someone else. And they could give me money, but why would I want to take from them? Why would I not just give? And so we learn from experience, and it gradually just comes out of you. At first it might be an affirmation. At first it might be, I need to be like this, just like little children have to be taught to share. They have to be taught that, you know, if I keep it all for myself, when somebody else wants, you know, half of my piece of cake or one of my 2 cookies or, you know, half of the apple that I have in my lunch, you know, I can just say, no, it's mine, I want it. But as Swami also writes elsewhere, you know, if you give it to someone, then you make a friend. And the cookie's just gone in no time at all. But the friendship could last forever. And so the constant stream of happiness that Swami refers to, which he refers to later, you know, is a very real thing, because the more we embrace the reality of others, the more they embrace our reality. And all of us live in this world. Loneliness, a sense of separation, isolation, all of those things are very deep-seated causes of grief in our lives. But if we want others to include us in their reality, what better way to bring that magnetism into our world than by behaving in the same way ourselves? So, my friends, sharing. God bless you.